I'm diving into the big question that neurodivergent travelers like myself have, which is, should you travel solo or should you travel in a group? If you're planning a trip and trying to decide whether to go solo or as part of an organized tour, then this video is going to give you the pros and cons around things that might impact you personally, such as decision fatigue, overwhelm, overstimulation, anxiety, and other concerns. I'll also share some personal insights that I've experienced as a person who's an autistic ADHDer, introvert, and also has dyscalculia. If you've done the organized group tour, pairing it with like traveling with friends or family or going solo, I'd love to know which one you prefer and share in the comments below and tell us why you prefer it, because I think that's often really interesting. So first up is solo travel. Traveling alone can be an amazing experience, especially if your flavor of neurodivergent likes alone time and the ability to control a lot of things around you. Here's some of the benefits of traveling alone. Number one, you have complete control over your itinerary. You can decide where to go, when to go, how to do it, how you're going to get there, and how long to stay. There's really no pressure to adapt to anyone else's preferences or schedule, so from that point of view, it's a lot more relaxing. And I think that's really crucial if you desire that flexibility to pause if you need some downtime or just have a sensory break. Next is, I guess it's kind of connected, but you have the freedom to just personalize the experience to you. If you struggle with like group activities or group dinners, then solo is actually a great way to go. You'll have a lot more control over the social interactions you have. Solo travel allows you to create a trip where you avoid a lot of the social fatigue. If you prefer just having a quiet, low stimulation place to go, then you can choose that. And I also think it's nice because if you've had a bad night's sleep, you can decide, oh, I'm gonna have a 0 day today, which is zero expectations for yourself, there's zero expectations for the day, and anyone else has zero expectations for you either, because like you're just gonna have a day off from everything. 0 days are really important just to recover and get your energy back for the next day. I guess you could even take like a half 0 day. Overall, with solo travel, it's very self-paced. If you don't want to rush, fine, don't. If you want to sit down and have a coffee or a beer somewhere, you can. It's up to you. So I'm traveling solo the majority of the time, and I really do like that. But solo travel definitely has its challenges, especially if you suffer from decision fatigue or anxiety, or just need more support with logistics. So here's a few things to keep in mind. Number one is there's a lack of support. So really, you're on your own in a lot of ways. Without that group, you're responsible for everything. So that's figuring out your accommodation, getting around, getting to places, and you're having to problem solve. So if your credit card stops working, you have to go deal with that. Or maybe there's a problem with your accommodation or your house sitting and it gets canceled by the owner 3 weeks before you're meant to be there. And yes, this just happened to me, so I'm still working on that. All of these things that can get overwhelming. I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed right now, actually, come to think of it. The next one is loneliness. And if you're more of an introvert like I am, then getting lonely isn't so much of a concern, but eventually we all want to hang out with other people. So my way around that is for my house sitting, I'm choosing cities where I already know people and there's no pressure for them to hang out with me, entertain me. Maybe we catch up for drinks or dinner or something like that. But then I have the ability to retreat back to my own space when I'm done. If you're in a place for an extended amount of time, then a lot of people turn to co-working spaces because often that's a built-in community. The other option is to look at Facebook groups or meetup groups, especially if you can join in advance because you can see what's coming up and then you can block those times in your calendar. And also if you need to RSVP or get a ticket, you can do that in advance and then it's available to you as opposed to just waiting for the last minute and there might not be a space for you. The next one is that eating out on your own might feel really weird. I definitely tend to eat at home more often because I'm house sitting a lot of the time, but I'll still go out for a coffee or a beer, maybe lunch. I mean, sometimes dinner. It just depends. I like to mix it up. I don't want to be completely isolated. If I was gonna having food out, then I would probably choose lunch over dinner. It just feels less weird. But that said, I actually did do a Michelin star restaurant by myself and I sat outside in full view of everybody and I have no regrets. Actually, it was quite a nice experience and It was actually incredibly good value for a Michelin star, so that was part of the no regrets either. Also, if you're just at a bar and you feel like having food, if you sit at the bar, it just feels less awkward because the seats are kind of facing towards the bar. It's sort of almost designed for less human interaction, so I actually do that sometimes too. The next con is the decision fatigue because you'll have to decide every little thing, what to buy for the groceries or how to spend the day. I guess the way around this is if you can try to make some of the decisions up front. That's not always easy because, you might be at the mercy of what your energy levels are telling you. So, but yeah, if you can, like, research some of the options up front. And that's what I try to do. And then sometimes each day is a little bit, we see what happens. The last con is around the money and the budgeting, and you're in control or not. The the budgeting side is a little bit more difficult because you need to be a lot more aware of how much you're spending, and if you've set yourself a daily budget, then making sure you don't go over that. If you have dyscalculia like me, that impacts things like if you get the receipt, figuring out the tip. If you're in a shop, if there's no tax added, remembering that exists. I actually hate using cash because there's just a lot more faff involved with that. So cards are easier for me. But anyway, it's we're still using cash. I'm okay with that. It's actually quite handy sometimes. Oh yeah, and currency exchange, that's also a challenge with numbers. But there's apps for that. If you're finding this useful, please hit like and subscribe. It's the easiest way to support my channel. Let's talk about guided group travel. Group travel has a lot of benefits, particularly for those who might find comfort in structure and shared experiences. Like I said, this is mostly from the viewpoint of organized tour group. But yes, I suppose a lot of these could also apply to if you're planning to travel with some friends or family. Overall, it's less planning stress because someone else is handling all of that. Like, literally, that's what you're paying them to do. So you won't need to figure out the accommodation, the transportation, any tickets for attractions, or where to eat, because if you're on a guided tour, they will have pre-researched all of that, and it's all designed to be as frictionless as possible. They will have booked the table in advance, and oftentimes the guide has a relationship with the people that run the restaurant. Trips I did in Asia, the options were even kind of narrowed even further for us. So, you could choose, chicken, whatever, and vegetarian, So from that point of view, it was pretty relaxed. Mostly you just show up. There's also less navigation stress because the guide is doing all of it. So I've done the tours where you have a guide and you have a driver. Sometimes it's the same person, but on the longer tours, it's definitely separate drivers, which is really helpful. The drivers can be taking care of the bus and, filling it up with fuel and all of that while the guide stays with the group and talks them through what's going to be happening next. The other nice thing about the group option is that you have a built-in social support. So it's not just that you're having that shared experience, but oftentimes if you've forgotten something, just simple things like an aspirin. Another huge bonus is that you can take photos of each other. Often there'll be like a WhatsApp group and you can share the photos in that. You can also ask the guide to take a photo, but in my experience, that's not like their focus, and you're not necessarily going to get the best and most flattering angle because it's just kind of like they just want to get it done. On a group tour, they can take you places that you would never figure out on your own, or it would be too difficult to get to on your own, or you just wouldn't be comfortable going to on your own. We went to, I guess we'd call it like bowling court when we were in Laos, and the average customer there was, middle-aged local man and a bunch of women showing up. I don't know. I don't know how they would have reacted if we didn't have our guide. I don't know. But it was actually quite a fun way of spending a part of an evening. And I just never would have done that if I wasn't on this tour. The last one I want to mention is again to do with money, because if you're doing a guided tour, it's going to be pretty much prepaid, and they will specify what's included. So a lot of times it's going to be, the transportation and the accommodation and some of the food, if not all of the food. From a budgeting point of view is so much simpler. I also think having someone around you who's also experiencing the same thing you are is hugely beneficial. They're in the same boat as you are. Maybe they don't know anybody else, depending on the type of trip it is, or otherwise, but they're really happy to speak to you, and you get to learn a lot about people. I have really enjoyed my group tours as well. If you like the sound of neurodivergent people traveling together, I'm thinking of a ways we can get groups together. I think that could be kind of fun. If you're interested and you want to know more, I'm going to add a link to the description and to the comments so you can register your interest, and you'll be the first to find out once I have some ideas. And I'd like to involve the people who are interested and how this might look as well. So yeah, please sign up if you're interested. Okay, let's talk about the cons of group travel. Of course, group travel is going to have its challenges, so let's talk about those. One of the big ones is going to be communication, and it's because you have a big group of people, representing an array of neurodivergence, and there might be people that have different native languages. So I have two examples. One is when we were in Asia, our group leader took us and we did like morning yoga. We were with I think a very revered yoga master. He was giving the instructions to the guide in the local language, and the guide was translating it to us in English. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if you've done yoga, you know what a downward dog is, but it was being translated as things like hind end in the air, lay head down. It was like very hard to get into the flow because of that. It was fine. It was kind of a funny experience in the end, but being very respectful at the time, of course. The other one is on a one-day trip when I was up in the Daintree in Australia. And at the start of the tour, the guide sent around a clipboard for everyone to note down their lunch choices. And that was fine because everyone could clearly see what the options were, think about it, and then make their selection. But then later, after lunch, he wanted us to stop at an ice cream place that's very famous in the area. And they make the ice cream with their, local fruit. So the choices were dairy or sorbet, and he thought a show of hands would be the easiest way to do that. Honestly, it was a disaster because not everybody understood the question, and so when it came time to distributing the ice creams, there was people who taking sorbet who hadn't actually ordered sorbet. And I think the lesson, maybe more for the guide, is that just use the clipboard system for every decision that the groups need to make. Just easier. Okay, the next con is that there's going to be less control overall of everything. It can be frustrating if you feel like you need more sensory breaks, or you just want the option to do something differently that might not be possible. I've been on tours where I started to think I don't think I can handle another crowd, and I would want to sort of hang back, and I really desperately wanted to sit down somewhere, but I couldn't because I would lose track of the guide, and they don't like that. So from that point of view, it can be quite tricky, which leads to the next point around overstimulation. Any group size, whether it's large or small, is a lot more overstimulating than just being by yourself. Plus, you add in whatever chaos is around you. I mean, that's maybe a bit harsh, but if there was like a lot of traffic or other groups, it can be a lot. I think a lot of times, you're going to end up with some sort of sensory overwhelm as much as you try to, use your plugs or whatever. The last one is like, if you're in a group, there's a little bit of pressure to socialize. And, depending on how my social battery is that day, I might be really, really happy to make a new friend. And I have, and I do. But at the same time, eventually you kind of think, all right, I need a little break. Or maybe you're starting the day low spoons and you don't want to talk much at all. In which case, if you have your noise canceling headphones, then I think it's fine to put them in if you just need to have a little break and listen to some podcast or something. I know, and if it's hard to find that moment of solitude in a group, you could always hang back. You could even just speak to the guide and ask if there's a way to just sit in the van for a while, sit in the coach for a while, whatever works for you and works for them. So what's the solution? What's the answer? I think a good middle ground is to choose a group guided tour that is maybe a smaller group, maybe no more than 14. There's plenty of companies out there that do that. And then what I would also suggest is have a few days before and at the end just by yourself. Having that padding, especially with the travel either side, is actually quite a good idea. So, with the smaller groups, it's just more manageable in terms of the social interaction, and there's a little bit more flexibility. If it's a large group, everything is very, very structured and there's not a lot of wiggle room. especially if you inform the tour guide, the tour company up front, if you have any specific accommodations you'd like them to make in terms of the pace or anything like that, just being able to offer you a low sensory option, then that's probably going to be easier in smaller groups. Fewer people means it's fewer names to remember. It's just less overwhelming. And I think as well, it's going to be, I don't know, my only comparison for this, I don't know if I have like a ton of comparisons, but I've done like trips with other women travelers, and the smaller group just meant there was never any chance for like little cliques to form, if that makes sense. And if you can find out the group size in advance, often they'll say what the maximum size is. So use that as a guide point, because I've been on tours where they said, oh, the maximum is 14, but it was really just 5. They might have like a minimum. I mean, I thought 5, that was almost too small, but it was still good fun. I think ultimately the best choice for you is just going to depend on your personal needs and possibly factor in where you're going. A place you've never been to before, and maybe if there's additional challenges around the language and time zones, then having a guided tour actually can be really good. You can choose to do a couple day tours. You could do it, maybe just 3 days, or, go the full blown like 10 days. I've enjoyed all of them. I've never regretted a tour so far. I do think you do get what you pay for. So check your reviews and ask them, see what they say. If you say, hey, I'm neurodivergent, I prefer this, this, and this, see what they say, right? I'd like to start contacting some of these companies as well. Anyway, if you like the idea of traveling with groups of other neurodivergent travelers, then please sign up with the link in the description or in the comments, because I will be using that to contact people and when I have some options. To recap, if you like the idea of total freedom and flexibility, then solo travel is probably better for you. If you'd rather share the experience and share the logistics and the burden of figuring it all out, then group travel is probably best for you. If you haven't already, hit like and subscribe, because it's a good way to tell YouTube to keep showing this to other people, especially those that might need this information. Bye for now.